My husband and I had been together for 7 years. I have a 13-year-old son with my ex and a 6-month-old with my husband. Since I gave birth, my husband has been weird. He's super hands-on, super attentive, loves our daughter more than anything, and has overall been super helpful, but he's changed. His patience with my older son is completely gone. He's quick to snap and say that we don't respect him. He often says, "I worked all freaking day," when it comes to damn near everything. He's been incredibly stressed out about finances, often vents and tells me he feels like he is failing and that he isn't providing enough. So I know there's a deep-rooted issue and that therapy would probably be a good thing. But he always says, "I don't have time for therapy, I'm always working." Even though he works 5 a.m. to 3 p.m. with the rest of the day off, and every Thursday and Friday he has days off, I work from home with a flexible schedule but the same overall hours as him. Anyways, not even 3 months ago, I literally told him that if he didn't change, I couldn't stay. He was acting bipolar, laughing one minute and absolutely pissed off about seemingly nothing the next. He was persistent and pleaded that he would do better, and he absolutely did up until 2 weeks ago. So we were all hanging out in the kitchen, kids included. I let my son hang out later than bedtime because we were having a good time, playing board games. My husband was okay with this until he wasn't, I guess is the best way to put it. Everything was fine, and then he just snapped. I had gotten up to get a drink of water, and my husband goes, "All right, enough, it's past your bedtime." My son goes, "Oh, come on, just a little bit later," and my husband snapped. He starts raising his voice, basically screaming about how no one respects him. My son immediately retreated to his room. I'm silent. I start washing the dishes and avoiding eye contact. He goes, "Great, now you're freaking pissed at me too?" This admittedly made me lash out. Maybe because I'm fed up, I don't know. I yelled at him, told him that maybe if he respected us or gave us something to respect, then this wouldn't be an issue. He then says, "What the frick is there for me to respect?" and then slams out of the house and leaves. It's like 11 p.m. at this point. I text him and tell him not to come home. He doesn't. He slept in his vehicle and went to work the next morning like nothing happened. I packed up me and the kids while he was at work. I obviously left a lot behind, so I left a note on the table saying, "I will be back for the rest of our stuff when I'm able." I then go to the courthouse and get the divorce papers. I had to get an attorney to actually understand how to fill it out, so it took me a little over a week, but once I had it all completed, I brought him the paperwork for him to sign. He had been texting and calling the entire time I was gone, begging us to come home. Said he was sorry, and obviously he respects us, but he's just really stressed out and he didn't understand why you'd let James stay up so late, knowing I had work the next day. Kept saying that me and the kids are the only reason why he hasn't lost himself completely. Says he will get therapy, etc., but I just don't trust him anymore. So when I went there and handed him the divorce papers, he was essentially blindsided because he thought we would be able to work this out. He is refusing to sign the papers as of right now, which I'm not super concerned with. But almost everyone I know is against me on this because he apologized and he obviously didn't mean it, he was just stressed, and think that I should just work it out with him because he was absolutely perfect up until I gave birth, and the stress of finances started weighing on him. He has never been good in high-stress environments, but it's been 6 months straight and I can't do it anymore. Am I the idiot? To add, tired of seeing it, so I'm not keeping our daughter from him. He's had plenty of opportunities to see his daughter if he so chose. He has seen her once. He's spending so much time begging me to come back home that he is not making an attempt to see his daughter. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot, I'm just stressed. Yeah, well, that happens to everyone. And it's not a free excuse to abuse your family. It's obvious you've tried to help and tried to encourage him to do something for himself. Good for you for doing what is best for your children. They don't deserve to live like that. I'm sure it hurts like hell. But he's just saying whatever he thinks will make you come home. Comment 2. Not the idiot, he needed a psychiatrist and therapy. He didn't get them. Treated you and your son like crap. What else is there to do but leave? And I wouldn't buy that he'll see a therapist if you come back, he'll just pretend. The people who will actually get a psychiatrist and therapy do so before it gets anywhere near this point. Now for the update. Thanks for reading my last post. So, 2 weeks have passed since I handed my husband the divorce papers, and things have been a mess. I thought I was doing the right thing by leaving, but now I'm not so sure. I made a mistake that changed everything, and it's been a downward spiral since then. After I left, I stayed at my sister's place with the kids. My husband kept calling and texting, but I ignored most of his messages. I was determined to move on. One day, I decided to go back to the house to get more of our stuff. I thought he would be at work, but he was there. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. He begged me to talk, and I agreed, thinking it might give me some closure. We sat down, and he started crying, saying he was sorry and that he would do anything to fix things. He promised to go to therapy, to be more patient, and to work on his issues. I felt a pang of guilt, but I stood my ground. I told him that I needed time to think and that I wasn't ready to come back. He asked if he could see our daughter, and I agreed. He spent a few hours with her, and I could see how much he missed her. It broke my heart, but I still felt like I was doing the right thing. A few days later, I got a call from my son's school. He had gotten into a fight with another student. When I picked him up, he was quiet and wouldn't talk about what happened. Later that night, he finally opened up. He said the other kid had been teasing him about his dad not being around. My heart sank. I realized that my decision to leave was affecting my son more than I had thought. I felt like I had failed him. I decided to talk to my husband again. I thought maybe we could come up with a plan to co-parent better. When I got to the house, he was sitting on the porch, looking defeated. We talked for hours, and he seemed genuinely remorseful. He told me about his childhood, how his dad was never around, and how he always promised himself he would be a better father. He said he felt like he was failing, and that's why he snapped. I could see the pain in his eyes, and it made me question everything. I decided to give him another chance. I told him that we could try therapy together and see if we could work things out. He was overjoyed and promised to do whatever it took. We started going to therapy, and things seemed to be getting better. He was more patient with my son, and we were communicating better. I thought maybe we could make it work, but then something happened that changed everything. One night, I was going through some old papers and found a letter from my husband's boss. It was a warning about his performance at work. It said that if he didn't improve, he would be fired. I confronted him about it, and he broke down. He admitted that he had been struggling at work for months and that he was terrified of losing his job. He said that's why he had been so stressed and why he snapped that night. I felt a mix of emotions. I was angry that he hadn't told me, but I also felt sorry for him. I decided to support him and help him get through this. We talked to the therapist about it, and she suggested that he take some time off work to focus on his mental health. He agreed, and things seemed to be getting better. But then he got a call from his boss. They had decided to let him go. He was devastated. He felt like he had failed us, and he started to spiral. He stopped going to therapy, and he became distant again. He would spend hours in the garage, not talking to anyone. I tried to be there for him, but it was like he had shut down completely. One night, I found him sitting in the garage staring at a bottle of pills. He said he couldn't take it anymore and that he felt like a burden. I was terrified. I called the therapist, and she suggested that he go to a mental health facility for a while. He agreed, and I took him there the next day. While he was there, I had to take care of everything on my own. It was exhausting, and I felt like I was drowning. My son was acting out more, and my daughter was fussy all the time. I felt like I had made a huge mistake by trying to work things out. I was overwhelmed and didn't know what to do. My husband was in the facility for a week, and when he came out, he seemed better. But things were still tense between us. He was trying, but I could see that he was struggling. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, afraid that he would snap again. One day, I got a call from my ex. He had heard about what was going on and offered to take our son for a while. I agreed, thinking it would give me some time to focus on my husband and our daughter. My son was reluctant to go, but I convinced him that it was for the best. With my son gone, things were a little easier, but I still felt like I was in over my head. My husband was trying to find a new job, but it was tough. He was getting more and more frustrated, and I could see the stress building up again. One night, we had a huge fight. He accused me of not supporting him and said that I was making things worse. I snapped and told him that I couldn't do it anymore. I told him that I wanted a divorce for real this time. He was devastated, but he didn't argue. He just packed a bag and left. Now I'm sitting here feeling like I've failed everyone. My son is with my ex, my husband is gone, and I'm alone with our daughter. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that things will never be the same. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for renting my house to a religious couple who prayed for lower rent and then trashed the place? I have a house in an area where the rental market is extremely difficult to get into. It's commonly said that the only way to find a place to rent is if you're already friends with the owner. I need to be elsewhere for a couple of years starting this summer, and I've told friends to let me know if they hear of anyone interested in renting my house. My friend Jake recommended a couple who are friends with his parents and trying to move to town. He introduced us briefly, and they seemed normal. So we started talking details, and we made plans for them to come see my house. Yesterday, I saw that the woman from that couple, we'll call her Sally, sent me a friend request on Facebook. I took a look at her posts, and I'd call them combatively religious. Here are some examples. Stop letting people who are not obeying God give you directions in life. Let God be your only judge. For anyone else who might try, will themselves be judged by him. Unfortunately, a lot of y'all met me before I had boundaries and knew God. I now walk with him, and I'm happy to burn bridges behind us as needed. I wonder how different our world would be if people were as passionate about Jesus as they are about money and politics. Even posts that are just about her morning coffee have a Bible verse or religious mantra attached. I find it really hard to trust people like this because I've seen ultra-religious people use lines like, "We prayed hard on it and we just feel like this is what God is asking of us right now," to justify doing terrible things. I grew up in the church, and a lot of my family is still very religious, and I've seen them use religion to justify physical punishment for children, behavior I'd consider spousal abuse, and most importantly, bad faith business interactions. Because of this, I told Jake that I wasn't interested in renting to Sally and her husband. I just don't trust them not to one day say, "We believe God meant for us to be in your house, so we don't believe we should need to pay rent anymore," or something like that. And then I've got squatters to deal with who believe God is on their side. Jake initially took it well, but apparently Sally and her husband didn't take it as well, and even talked to his parents. I'm not sure exactly how much he told them, but he came back to me and said I've put him in a tough spot. I should give them a chance. His parents are embarrassed about the situation, etc. I've always thought getting bad vibes from someone was reason enough not to rent to them, which is basically what this is. But am I being a discriminatory AH for making that judgment based on religion? To add, for all those saying I could be breaking the law, this sort of transaction is exempt from the statute on discriminatory conduct under the Fair Housing Act. See, nothing in this part, other than the prohibitions against discriminatory advertising applies to 1. The sale or rental of any single-family house by an owner, provided the following conditions are met. The owner does not own or have any interest in more than 3 single-family houses at any one time. 2. The house is sold or rented without the use of a real estate broker, agent, or salesperson, or the facilities of any person in the business of selling or renting dwellings. I only own one house, and I'm not using an agent or broker. I'm just looking for potential renters via word of mouth. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. Taking her religious beliefs out of the equation, they did not respect you saying no to renting to them. They now are trying to use your friend to make you put yourself in a situation you are not comfortable with. That's already a preview into what they could be like as renters, and reason enough to continue saying no. Jake is manipulating you here. You did not put him in any spot. He did this himself, and is trying to make you the scapegoat. He does not have your best interest at heart. You may want to reconsider the friendship, or at the very least adjust it around the behaviors he's showing you. Comment 2. Jake, the fact that we are having this conversation is proof that they would be difficult tenants. I don't want to have to deal with both your parents and yourself every time my tenants don't like something. You have just solidified my decision. I will not be strong-armed into renting to people I don't trust to act appropriately. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. So, a lot has happened in the past 2 weeks since I decided not to rent my house to Sally and her husband. First off, Jake and I had a pretty heated conversation. He was really upset that I didn't give Sally and her husband a chance. He said that his parents were really disappointed in him for recommending them to me and then having it fall through. He felt like he was caught in the middle of a mess that he didn't create, I tried to explain my concerns about Sally's posts and my past experiences with ultra-religious people, but he just couldn't see my side of it. He kept saying that I was being unfair and that I should have at least met them in person before making a decision. A few days after that conversation, I got a call from Jake's mom. She was very polite but firm. She said that she understood my concerns, but felt that I was judging Sally and her husband too harshly. She mentioned that they were really good people and that they had been through a lot recently. Apparently, they had lost their previous home due to some financial issues and were really looking forward to starting fresh in a new town. She asked me to reconsider my decision and at least meet them in person. Feeling a bit guilty, I agreed to meet them. We set up a time for them to come over and see the house. When they arrived, they were very polite and seemed genuinely interested in the place. We talked for a while and they shared their story. They had indeed gone through some tough times, and they seemed very sincere about wanting to make a fresh start. Despite my initial reservations, I started to feel like maybe I had been too quick to judge. However, things took a turn when we started discussing the lease terms. Sally mentioned that they were hoping for a lower rent than what I was asking. She said that they had prayed about it and felt that God was leading them to ask for a more affordable rate. This immediately set off alarm bells for me. I explained that the rent I was asking for was already below market rate and that I couldn't go any lower. They seemed disappointed but said they understood. After they left, I felt conflicted. On one hand, they seemed like nice people who were genuinely trying to start over. On the other hand, the mention of praying about the rent made me uneasy. I decided to sleep on it and make a decision the next day. The next morning, I woke up to a series of messages from Jake. He said that Sally and her husband had told his parents about our meeting and that they were very upset. They felt that I was being unreasonable and that I was discriminating against them because of their religion. Jake said that his parents were now questioning his judgment and that it was causing a lot of tension in their family. He begged me to reconsider and give them a chance. Feeling pressured, I decided to give in. I called Sally and her husband and told them that I was willing to rent the house to them at the original rate. They seemed very grateful and agreed to move in the following week. Fast forward to a week later, and they moved in without any issues. However, things quickly started to go downhill. Within a few days, I started getting calls from my neighbors. They said that Sally and her husband were being very loud and disruptive. They were playing loud music late at night and having people over all the time. One neighbor even mentioned that they had seen some suspicious activity around the house. I decided to go over and talk to them. When I arrived, the house was a mess. There were people everywhere, and it looked like they were having a party. I pulled Sally aside and asked her what was going on. She seemed very defensive and said that they were just having some friends over. I reminded her that this was a quiet neighborhood and that they needed to be respectful of the neighbors. She seemed to understand and promised to keep it down. However, the problems continued. Over the next few days, I kept getting calls from my neighbors about the noise and the constant stream of people coming and going. I decided to give them one last warning. I went over to the house and told them that if the behavior continued, I would have to ask them to leave. Sally seemed very upset and said that they were just trying to make friends in the new town. She mentioned that they had prayed about it and felt that they were doing the right thing. At this point, I was at my wit's end. I decided to give them one more chance, but things only got worse. A few days later, I got a call from the police. They said that there had been a noise complaint and that they had to come over to break up a party. They mentioned that they had found some illegal substances at the house and that they were issuing a warning. I immediately went over to the house and confronted Sally and her husband. They seemed very apologetic and said that they had no idea about the illegal substances. They promised to clean up their act and be more respectful of the neighbors. However, I had had enough. I told them that they needed to leave and that I would be terminating the lease. They seemed very upset and said that they had nowhere else to go. They mentioned that they had prayed about it and felt that they were meant to stay in the house. I stood my ground and told them that they needed to leave by the end of the week. The next few days were very tense. They eventually moved out, but not without causing some damage to the house. I had to spend a lot of time and money fixing things up. Jake and I are no longer on speaking terms, and his parents are still very upset with me. Looking back, I wish I had trusted my instincts from the beginning. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for defending my pregnant cousin against my wife and sister's cruel accusations? I am 27-year-old male, married to 26-year-old female. We will call my wife Bailey. I also have a sister we will call Emma, 29, and a cousin we will call Nicole, 32. My wife and my sister dislike my cousin. They are always making snide remarks and being rude, especially since my son and my niece were born. About a week apart, they are now 2 years old. So here's the backstory. My cousin Nicole did not have the easiest life. Her parents are genuinely terrible. She raised all 3 of her siblings by herself for the most part. When Nicole was 18, she was in a hurtful relationship and got pregnant. The guy tried to unalive her. It was bad. The pregnancy was awful for her. She found out she had something wrong with her uterus. Then she found out there was something wrong with the baby. He had some sort of cyst and half of his brain didn't develop. She was told he'd never walk or talk or have any sort of life. She ended up going into labor early and nearly bled to death, and had to deal with having a preemie with a disability. She worked 2 jobs and was a single mom. She fought for that baby, and now you wouldn't know anything was wrong with him. She had him in every therapy she could get him in and still does. As far as I know, my cousin has never done a single drug. She doesn't drink. She doesn't party. She is remarried to a guy that seems great and owns a small farm. She homeschools her son due to all of his issues. She does a lot of community work. Honestly, the woman may as well be superhuman in my eyes. Most other people would have buckled under the pressure, and she's taking it in stride. Last year, she had a miscarriage and had to have several surgeries, and she is currently pregnant again. Hopefully, this one works out for her. Anyway, my sister swears she saw my cousin smoke a cigarette during her first pregnancy, and believes that is the reason the child turned out the way he is, which is absolute nonsense. Even if she did, it would not have caused all of those issues, and my cousin was going through absolute hell during that pregnancy. I'm honestly surprised she was still standing. A cigarette was the least of her worries. My cousin told everyone she is pregnant again recently, and my sister and my wife made a snide remark about not messing this one up, and my cousin let them have it. She basically told them that they wouldn't survive if they were in her shoes and they weren't better than her. And when they have to deal with a disabled child, single parenthood, 2 jobs, and pumping every 2 hours, then they can speak to her about it. They also made snide remarks about breastfeeding, and I know for a fact my cousin pumped because I accidentally walked in on her once, so I don't know why they think she didn't, and that makes them better. They've never had to deal with a single thing she's dealt with in their perfect lives, which is absolutely true. Both my sister and my wife have been absolutely spoiled their entire lives and have never had to deal with anything hard at all. Pregnancies haven't had a single hitch. Neither of them ever were single parents, nor have they had to deal with the babies by themselves at all. Anyway, my cousin was pissed, and by the time she walked away, my wife was crying and my sister was just angry. She was called out publicly. My wife asked me why I didn't defend her, and I told her my cousin was absolutely right. The only thing they had on her was a single cigarette years ago. That's insane to think they are somehow better than her, and what they said to her was absolutely appalling. She needed to really think about what all my cousin has been through and then apologize. Maybe she could learn something. Now my wife and my sister are both mad at me, and my wife hasn't spoken to me since Saturday when this all happened. I'm wondering if I was an AH for how I spoke to my wife. I feel like what I said was true, but maybe I should have said it nicer or something. I don't know. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Why are you married to such a vile person? I mean, you can't choose your biological family, so you're stuck being the brother of a complete witch. But you have a choice with your wife. She is a viciously unkind excuse for a woman, and you have children who will one day look to her as a role model. Are you okay with that? Your choice of being with someone like her reflects just as poorly on you as her remarks do on her. You are not the idiot in this situation, but you will be to yourself if you let this ride. Comment 2. Set aside the toxic impact of your wife's behavior on your marital relationship for the moment. You share a kid, but mom, 1, engages in vicious conduct, which is only, 2, magnified by the viciousness of others, that is, your poisonous sister, 3, is unable to recognize she is wrong, and 4, responds to criticism by icing you out. Do you seriously want to expose your child to this kind of garbage without taking the needed steps to address it? Not the idiot, unless you fail to double down. Now, for the update. Thanks for all the comments on my last post. So a lot has happened in the past 2 weeks, and it's been interesting to say the least. After the confrontation, things were tense at home. Bailey barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was curt and cold. I tried to give her space, thinking she needed time to process everything. Emma, on the other hand, was openly hostile. She sent me a few angry texts, accusing me of taking Nicole's side and not supporting my own family. It was exhausting, but I tried to keep my cool. A few days later, Bailey's silence broke, but not in the way I hoped. She told me she was going to stay with her parents for a while to clear her head. I didn't want to argue, so I helped her pack and watched her drive away with our son. The house felt empty without them, and I couldn't shake the feeling that things were spiraling out of control. Meanwhile, Nicole reached out to me. She apologized for the scene at the family gathering and said she didn't mean to cause any trouble between me and Bailey. I told her it wasn't her fault and that she had every right to stand up for herself. We talked for a while, and she mentioned that she was having complications with her pregnancy. She was scared, but trying to stay positive. I felt a pang of guilt for not being more supportive of her sooner. A few days later, I got a call from Bailey. She sounded different, more vulnerable. She said she had been thinking a lot and realized that maybe she had been too harsh on Nicole. She wanted to come home and talk things through. I was relieved and told her I'd be waiting. When Bailey came back, we had a long, emotional conversation. She admitted that she had been jealous of Nicole. She felt like she could never measure up to her, and that made her lash out. She also confessed that she was struggling with being a mom and felt like she was failing. I told her that everyone has their struggles and that it's okay to feel overwhelmed. We hugged, and for the first time in days, I felt like we were on the same page. Emma, however, was a different story. She refused to back down and continued to badmouth Nicole. It was frustrating, but I decided to focus on fixing things with Bailey first. We started going to couples therapy, and it's been helping. We're learning to communicate better and understand each other's perspectives. Then, something unexpected happened. Nicole's husband, who I always thought was a stand-up guy, left her. He said he couldn't handle the stress of another complicated pregnancy and just walked out. Nicole was devastated. She called me in tears, and I rushed over to her place. She was a mess, and I didn't know what to say. I just held her and let her cry. This turn of events made me realize how much Nicole had been holding together on her own. She was always the strong one, but even she had her breaking point. I decided to step up and be there for her, not just as a cousin, but as a friend. I started helping out on her farm and spending more time with her son. It was tough, but it felt right. Bailey saw the change in me and started to come around. She even suggested we invite Nicole over for dinner. It was awkward at first, but slowly they started to talk. Bailey apologized for her behavior, and Nicole, being the bigger person, accepted it. It was a small step, but it felt like progress. Emma, however, was still a thorn in our side. She refused to let go of her grudge and continued to stir the pot. It was draining, but I tried to keep my focus on the positive changes happening at home. One night, Bailey and I were talking about everything that had happened. She mentioned that she had always felt like she was living in Nicole's shadow. She admired her strength, but also resented it. I told her that everyone has their own battles, and that comparing ourselves to others only makes things worse. We agreed to work on being more supportive of each other and less judgmental of others. As for Nicole, she's still struggling, but she's a fighter. She's determined to make it through this pregnancy and give her son the best life possible. I've been spending more time with her, helping out where I can, and just being there for her. It's brought us closer, and I feel like I'm finally being the cousin she deserves. In the end, things are still complicated, but we're all trying to move forward. Bailey and I are working on our marriage, and Nicole is doing her best to stay strong. Emma is still a problem, but I'm hopeful that she'll come around eventually. Life isn't perfect, but we're all doing our best to make it work. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day. Great.